Hello. How is everybody?
Hi, Rebecca.
Hi. How are you?
Good, how are you?
I'm good. Good. I'm glad you could make it.
Yeah, I made sure I was gonna stay home and finish this and then see what's going on.
All right. Sounds good. All right. I'm just going to get that to the beginning here. All right. Well, welcome everyone to How to Jumpstart Your Thyroid Without Synthroid. So you're in the right place today. If you have had all the symptoms of hypothyroid, but your doctor tells you that you're fine. Maybe you've been diagnosed with a thyroid disease like hypothyroid or Hashimoto's, today's webinar is for you. If you've tried taking vitamins and herbal supplements before on your own and didn't notice any changes in weight loss or energy like it promised, or if you feel like crap a lot of days and you're ready to do something different about it. Here's what we're going to be doing today and learning about on our call. What blood tests you need to have done to properly assess your thyroid so you can actually see what is going on. Why intermittent fasting can impede your thyroid so that you can't lose weight. Why thyroid medication is not the solution for a sluggish metabolism, and why you can't ignore your gut when it comes to your hormones. So this training is not for you if you think you just need to find the right pill and it will solve all your problems. You're not ready to hear about all the ways the environment could be messing up your thyroid, or you're not ready to take responsibility for your own health. Or if you get upset when someone gives you 60 minutes of free information and then makes an offer at the end. Plus, if you stay till the end today, I have 2 fun rewards for you. One is a bonus of 9 signs your skin is warning you about your thyroid problem. And number 2 is the top 5 blood tests for high performers. So these are not thyroid blood tests, but they're blood tests that I find very important for improving people's health and getting a great idea of where inflammation and other issues in the gut might be. So why I identify with the things that you might be struggling with was because of my own journey, that at 21, I was probably in the worst shape of my life. I had been struggling with painful digestive issues, cramps and diarrhea. My skin was terrible. Actually, I had not the greatest periods, and things finally came to a point where I couldn't be 5 minutes from a bathroom without getting into trouble. So when I was finally diagnosed with ulcerative colitis, I was told I would be on medication for life. And I just really didn't love that and felt like that was probably me being at rock bottom. And I just decided that I had to get out of this position, and it changed everything for me, including my career path. So at this point, I've now been a naturopathic doctor for over 19 years, and the majority of my practice is focused on treating thyroid disorders. I also have now created a program called 8 Steps to Jumpstart Your Thyroid. And today we are going to talk about number 1, number 3, and number 5. But these are the most important things that I find for people when they have a thyroid issue. And so I've laid out this program so that you'd be better able to really make progress quickly in your thyroid journey. So we're going to talk about these all together. We'll just touch on 1, 3, and 5 today, but you can see that when you know your numbers, when you know how to detox, when you can clean up your environment, when you know what nutrients that you need to be focused on, when you get your digestive tract cleaned up, when you recognize the other hormones that can be affecting your thyroid. And then when we get into what are the best advanced tests that you need to have done to figure out those hormones and gut bugs, then that will really help to like set you in the right direction. And plus my supplements that I find are superstars when it comes to thyroid function. So today's top 3 things we're going to talk about are knowing your numbers, what you need to get tested, cleaning up your environment, and what will make you feel overweight and fatigued, and getting gutsy, how diet and microbes affect your thyroid. So how the thyroid works. So the thyroid actually functions from signaling from the hypothalamus to the pituitary gland. And so the pituitary is actually the secretor of the hormone TSH. So when people get their thyroid tested, the most common blood test that's run is the TSH, or thyroid stimulating hormone. So that's actually just a measure of how hard the pituitary is signaling to the thyroid, and how hard the thyroid should be working dependent on what the pituitary is telling it. So it's not actually a thyroid hormone that is often measured. So that's where we want to start looking deeper, and we can't just base our whole diagnosis on TSH levels alone, because then we have to see, what does the thyroid gland do itself? So the thyroid then secretes out T4, majority, 80% of the hormones coming from your thyroid gland is T4. There's also about 10% T3, and then there's other 2 hormones, T1 and T2, that we don't actually measure on blood levels. So we can have issues with the thyroid not being able to put out enough hormone. Typically, T4 and T3 have a negative feedback loop to the pituitary, and should then, when we have adequate amounts of those hormones, it should downregulate the production of TSH. But there can be issues with the thyroid hormone production. There can be issues that we're not seeing right away with hormone levels. So we can have nodules happening on the thyroid. We can just have increased size or goiter happening in the thyroid that might not actually affect the hormone numbers right away, but can be affecting you symptom-wise. And then once the thyroid hormones have been released from the gland, it then goes out to the tissues, so the peripheral tissues, the things like your brain, the liver, and these have to then be converted. And sometimes we have issues with converting our T4 to T3, and and so we can have issues with tissue resistance, and having the hormones not actually being able to get into the cell as easily. So there's those issues that we look at as well. And so we have to think about, well, are we dealing with an issue of like too much reverse T3 happening? Are we dealing with other hormones that might be impeding our conversion? Are we dealing with a lack of nutrient that might be stopping the hormones from getting into the tissue? And so we can see just from following along that there's at least 4 different places where we can end up with trouble in our thyroid hormone cascade. So the thyroid hormone cascade really, as I said, is a negative feedback loop. And because of the effectiveness of binding that can happen, or the ineffectiveness of binding that can happen at the tissue level, this is why medication can often not address all of the issues that you may be experiencing with your thyroid hormones. We need to address the entire body, and we need to really focus on like, the production of the hormone, the cell receptors, and detox through the liver and gut to maximize our hormone function. So the blood tests that I like to look at and that I feel like are essential for everyone to have done when they have a thyroid issue is to have at least have their thyroid antibodies checked. So when we're thinking about, do you have just hypothyroidism or do you also have Hashimoto's, an autoimmune issue? We want to look at things like your thyroid peroxidase antibodies, which is the TPO, or the thyroglobulin antibodies. So the thyroid peroxidase antibody is the immune response against the enzymes that help with making the thyroid hormones, and then the thyroglobulin antibodies are against the proteins in the thyroid. And then the hormones themselves that are coming from the thyroid are the free T4 and free T3. And then the thyroglobulin is the protein in the thyroid that will tell us about growth. So whether there's nodules, whether there's something precancerous going on. And then of course, TSH, which will generally always be tested. So as I mentioned before in my post was that why you shouldn't intermittent fast when you have a thyroid problem. So these graphs here are showing, the lights are showing the daytime and the dark bars there on the timeline are showing nighttime. And the dotted lines here are showing what happens to your hormone levels when you intermittent fast, and this is showing the regular curve. So this is thyroid T3 hormone here, and we can see what goes on is that instead of having a nice higher diurnal variation in your T3, we actually see the numbers come way down and just stay pretty flat. So it's kind of an interesting pattern that comes out, and we can also see that cortisol levels can be increased with intermittent fasting. And the one thing that does improve in a positive way is the insulin. So it's really dependent on what's going on in your body, whether you have just issues with insulin, but if there's other hormonal issues like with your thyroid or cortisol levels, then sometimes doing things like intermittent fasting can actually be exacerbating the problem. All right. So moving on, that was talking briefly about getting to know your numbers, but we're going to talk now about what things in your environment can be making you feel more fatigued and adding to weight loss resistance. All right, so the thyroid is actually affected by many chemicals in our world. And so if you think that you haven't been exposed to any chemicals, I hope that after listening to this today, you're going to start to question a lot more things that could be affecting you. So chemicals in your house that you may not have thought of is something that is goes by the acronym of PFOAs. And these PFOAs are things that are a chemical that's used in nonstick coatings. So things like your nonstick frying pans, and even flame retardants. It's used in furniture. It's used as a stain protector for carpets. It's used in waterproofing materials. If you've ever bought a shirt that says it's a non-iron shirt, then it will have these PFOAs. Any kind of shoes that say they're water resistant have been sprayed with this chemical. And we know that this chemical can actually impede how the thyroid hormones are able to work. So that's an interesting one, I think. And then if we move into the bathroom and we start looking at things like your skincare products, interestingly, things like that would have anything that says it has perfume or fragrance listed on the label actually contains phthalates. And so phthalates are a plastic derivative They help to enhance and maintain the fragrance in the products. But what phthalates have been shown to do is speed up the removal of thyroid hormones from the body, so effectively making you more deficient in your thyroid hormones. Also, in this post-COVID world, everyone has used a ton of antimicrobial agents on their hands. And so one in particular that is bad and often used in more hospital type settings is the triclosan, or also called Microban. And this antimicrobial agent will also impair your thyroid function. So if you haven't looked at your hand sanitizers, or even I've seen Microban listed or used in things like air filters. I've seen it used in things where they're like, oh, the steering wheel on a car is antimicrobial. So there's many different applications of this product, but once it's on your skin and in your system, it can affect your thyroid function. All right, so PFCs, or perfluorinated chemicals, are also a thyroid hormone disruptor. And these are the things that, like, even though we have these lovely biodegradable takeout containers and pizza boxes, the reason that they don't leak is that they're coated. And this chemical can get into your food and then into your body. And it takes a very long time for your body to break these down and remove them. And in the end, slows down and disrupts your hormone function. A big one that a lot of people aren't aware of is polyvinyl chloride. So PVC is used in a lot of different applications, but one that I will tell you a story about is the use of polyvinyl chloride in flooring. So vinyl flooring is really popular these days, and people are like using it because it's very durable and has like all these great long-lasting effects, and it, you know, looks a lot better than it did before. But I had a lady that had renovated her full house and had put vinyl flooring through the entire house, and within a year had developed Hashimoto's. And I'm certain that the off-gassing from her flooring had contributed to her quick development of Hashimoto's in her mid-50s. The US Department of Health has put out a toxicology report on PVC and stated that vinyl chloride has not been officially classified as an endocrine modulator. However, adverse reproductive and developmental effects have been reported in humans and laboratory animals, and effects on the thyroid gland have also been reported. So I just have also another picture of a shower curtain. So those plasticky shower curtains are PVC as well. So we can always choose like a nylon shower curtain over a plasticky one and make an easy switch for our hormones. All right, so fluoride, people might be a bit surprised about fluoride and that it can disrupt the thyroid gland. And we think about it typically in toothpaste, but Calgary is looking at adding fluoride back into the water. And they've found that although it can prevent dental caries when used topically, it's actually not meant to be swallowed. And so consuming as little as 2 to 5 milligrams of fluoride over a few months can lower your thyroid function. And unfortunately, you would consume 2 to 5 milligrams every day if you were drinking unfiltered tap water. So that's a very significant concern if fluoride and when fluoride comes back into the water. BPA has been like talked about a ton. And BPA, we kind of all like, oh, I'm not exposed to BPA anymore. They took it out of plastics. I have a BPA-free water bottle. However, if you drink out of a disposable water bottle, you're going to get more, you're going to have exposure to BPA there. BPA is used in the lining of any kind of canned foods, unless they've specifically said it's not in there. It's used in water supply lines. It's used in all types of plastics that technically don't touch food. So the lids of containers that don't have a stamp on them, or even if they could contain BPA. BPA can be in cash register receipts, so the paper that comes from that. And another one that I found really interesting is if you use dental floss, that's kind of that plasticky, like tape type one. It also has a bunch of BPA. And then further into the dental world, we know that there's still BPA in things like dental composites and sealants that they'll apply to teeth. And these can be damaging not only to the thyroid gland, but for the cardiovascular system, for reproductive issues. It can influence fertility, libido, and it can increase the risk of breast cancer and prostate cancer. And there's actually been studies showing that BPA, the rise in BPA in the environment and the rise of type 2 diabetes actually follow an identical curve. So there is some correlation definitely between BPA exposure and insulin resistance and weight gain, so therefore weight gain, and then also with the risk of asthma. Herbicides and pesticides will reduce the thyroid's ability to utilize iodine. So these chemicals are ones that we're going to want to work on avoiding. However, this is becoming increasingly difficult to do because of things like runoff, and then herbicides and pesticides can just enter our water supply, and these are not filtered out. So herbicides, if we can, eat more organic, choosing our organic foods, things like that have been, especially ones that are heavily sprayed, things like berries and peppers and apples are always best to have organic. And I'm also a really big proponent of having organic meats, because when the animals eat food that is not organic, these chemicals get concentrated in their tissue, and then you get an even higher dose of these things. So when possible, I'd love for it to not go in so that we don't have to worry about getting it out. Okay, so let's chat about microbes and the gut with your thyroid. So SIBO, or something called small intestine bacterial overgrowth, has been shown to be increased in people with hypothyroidism. So with hypothyroidism, when we have a decrease in basically metabolism of the body, the digestive tract also slows down. And when the digestive tract is slower, we can increase the likelihood of more bacterial overgrowth happening. And although it's really common for people with an underfunctioning thyroid to complain about having constipation, there's also a really good chance that some of that issues with digestion, things like bloating and gas and constipation, or possibly diarrhea or reflux, could be due to a bacterial overgrowth in the small intestine. So these are microbes that would normally grow in your small intestine. Now we just have too much of them, and they are creating more issues for how we can move our bowels, and actually also plays into how we can metabolize our hormones. Okay. Another big microbe that we'll often see in conjunction with the thyroid issue is Candida. So Candida is a yeast and it can be the trigger for an autoimmune disease. It can also be something that interferes with nutrient absorption. And so yeast can colonize many different areas of the body, including the gut, the vagina, skin, mouth, and nose. If we see the thing with Candida and why it can be so intrusive is that it grows these nice long stalks that you see here. And these are called hyphae, and they can embed into the lining of the digestive tract. And this leads to increased permeability of your digestive tract. And when we have cells that are not all nice and tight close up to each other, we leave ourselves open to increased food sensitivities because now our food's not being absorbed properly by the cells. It's escaping through, it's stimulating our immune system. And then when the immune system's stimulated, it continues its autoimmune attack. And in Hashimoto's, that attack is targeted at the thyroid. So if you consume a diet that's high in carbs, that's high in refined sugars, or sugar in general, if you eat a high fruit diet, if you eat a lot of foods that contain yeast, like bread, or alcohol, then you have a much greater risk of Candida being a trigger for your thyroid disease. So often working on reversing some of these things can be a huge part of your thyroid healing. So when we think about these kinds of like abstract ideas of like what kind of microbes are in our digestive tract, sometimes it's best just to test. And one of my favorite tests for this is something called the GR-MAP test. It's a DNA-based stool test, and it really helps you to get to know what kind of microbes are in your digestive tract. And it can also help to point out things like, are you absorbing nutrients properly? Whether you have enough digestive enzymes to break down your fats or foods properly. And if you have some of those specific strains that sometimes we identify with being like an autoimmune trigger in the case of Hashimoto's, but also on a metabolic level, we can see imbalances in the bacteria that may make you more of a super absorber of carbs. So there is metabolic ratios that we look for between different types of bacteria, and that we can pick up on with this kind of stool testing. It's also a way of looking at like whether there is an issue with parasites, whether you have more of that small intestine bacterial overgrowth happening. Do you have certain microbes that might be increasing the amount of histamine in your body, as those also be a trigger for the immune system? And there's also a way of determining whether there's celiac antibodies within the gut. So celiac disease and Hashimoto's can be very closely tied. Anytime you have one autoimmune disease, you can have another. And celiac and Hashimoto's tend to run around together. And so it's really common that people that have hypothyroid disorder diagnosis, it's like 97% of people are actually Hashimoto's. So again, if you've never been tested to see if you're Hashimoto's, then that's your thing. But then figuring out, do I also have some level of what is happening? That can be another one there. All right, so we talked about the yeast organisms contributing to things like intestinal permeability. And through intestinal permeability, that also then leads us down the path to increase the amounts of food sensitivities. So sometimes what we need to be doing when there's a thyroid issue is controlling the immune system and the inflammatory process that's happening in the body. So foods can be a huge trigger of inflammation, and knowing what types of foods can trigger your immune system and trigger inflammation is very important for the gut, to be able to heal, and therefore the thyroid to be able to heal. And as an added bonus, most people notice that their joints also feel better when they stop eating foods that are creating more inflammation for them. So food sensitivity testing can be something that people look at doing to figure out what that's looking like. But there's also ways of doing elimination type diets that can help you to figure out what types of foods are creating inflammation and decreasing your thyroid function. So here's a case study for you. So I'm talking about a patient, Sarah, we'll call her, was a 39-year-old active female who came to see me. She was diagnosed with hypothyroidism 5 years ago. She was suffering with stubborn weight gain of at least 15 pounds over the last 2 years and felt like no matter what she did, it wouldn't come off or stay off. Her digestion was not optimal. She often suffered with constipation. Her periods were painful, and she felt like they were getting increasingly heavier. She had worked with a naturopath in Ontario before moving out here last year. But she had also was going through testing to see if she was developing another autoimmune disease. And so she decided that she needed to do things differently. We tested her thyroid and we did a GI map test. And because of her digestive issues, we just preemptively started on a low FODMAP diet. So that's like a diet to improve that small intestine bacterial overgrowth, just to see if things like bloating and constipation could get better while we waited for her test results to come in. All right, so her GI map test came back and showed high levels of a bacteria called H. pylori that's really common in the stomach and can overgrow and create a lot of motility issues and absorption issues of very important nutrients for the thyroid and for the body and the energy levels in general. So things like iron, calcium, and B12 can all be impaired with a high level of H. pylori. She also had elevated anti-gliadin antibodies on her GI map test, and the bacteria levels showed that there was inflammation within the GI tract. So with that in mind, we decided to move to a diet of only cooked vegetables to relieve some of the stress from the gut, and added in soothing nutrients plus with the removal of gluten. Within a month, when she came back in, she reported having the most regular bowel movements she'd had in years. Her period came and she was not in pain as badly as before, which was a huge win for her. And she noticed next month that within another month that her clothes were fitting better. She had said that these were clothes that she hadn't worn in over a year because she just hadn't even been able to put them on and do them up. So that was like huge for her. She felt her digestion was so much better that she had started to include more raw veggies, and even those weren't bothering her. Over that time, her energy levels were also coming up a lot, and she was feeling like the symptoms of hypothyroidism that she had come to see me with initially were really resolving. All right, so we've quickly gone through 3 of the 8 steps Melissa had explained a few other tests in there. So again, when you want to work on improving your thyroid, there's many things that need to be considered. Your thyroid is a very reactionary gland. It is influenced by many different factors. So when you know your numbers, you can figure out a lot more of where you need to focus your attention. When you know that your liver is functioning properly, you know that your hormones can be broken down and cleared out. When you know that your body is not being polluted constantly, then we can optimize our thyroid function. When we maximize the nutrients that the thyroid needs, then we know our thyroid is able to do its job at its best level. When we remove things like bacteria or yeast or parasites or different types of overgrowths or infections in the gut, and we remove foods that are sensitive, we know our thyroid can function better. And when we get into hormones like estrogen and cortisol and insulin and figure out those and if they're draining our thyroid, then again, the thyroid functions a lot better. And if you can know what tests to do, you're way further ahead and in a much shorter time. And then using supplements that are more specific always can make a huge difference for people as well. So why did you show up today? To hear all about me explaining things to jumpstart your thyroid. Maybe you've been frustrated that your thyroid symptoms are not going away. It could be that you're sure your thyroid is not working, but your doctor tells you that you're fine. Or maybe you've heard about other people and know that they're having success with their thyroid issues and you want to see if that's possible for you too. Or perhaps you just wanted to hang out with me. Here's what I've figured out about people and listening to webinars is that about 30% of you will be self-starters and you'll take this information and you can start to implement it on your own. However, the vast majority of you are left sitting here with more questions, you need more assistance, you need accountability, and you're looking for more guidance. So regardless, I want you all to finally achieve your health goals the fast and easy way with me holding your hand and finally giving you the results you deserve. So I want you to go from A to B as quickly as possible and not do this. So nothing I've shared with you here today is theory or fluff. These are things that I've done in my practice. They've generated consistent results, and I've helped hundreds of people with thyroid issues achieve predictable digestion, better body composition, and more energy. And it doesn't matter if you've never heard of SIBO before, or if you've never thought of testing your thyroid for antibodies. It's all about baby steps and taking action. So some of the benefits of joining the Thyroid Jumpstart program is that you will receive 8 step-by-step videos of what you need to be working on. I've also created a guidebook for you to track your results and keep track of your action steps and where you need to be moving next. This time, I'm going to be offering you 4 weekly group meetings with me to go over the modules and to ask questions. So we would be doing like 2 modules a week instead of the usual 1 a week. And then also giving you numerous meal plans to give you guidance wherever you need to start. So the obvious question here is, how can you apply these steps in order to get control over your thyroid and feel 100 times better? So you have the choice. You can do it the slow way through trial and error, and by taking some of what I've given you here today, or you can do it quickly using the Thyroid Jumpstart program and with the added bonus of my support for the next 4 weeks, get way further ahead in way less time. So the modules again are getting to know your numbers so that you can know and feel confident that your thyroid is not the only thing to blame for your low thyroid symptoms. You're going to do a liver detox, and this is foundational for how your body will be able to process all your hormones and make them and take them in. You're going to clean up your environment. We're going to stop polluting ourselves and get rid of those toxic chemicals. We're going to work on exercise, diet, and essential nutrients. And you'll learn what 5 essential nutrients you'll need to have energy. And maybe that'll just be the one key thing that you end up taking away. Fixing your gut is fixing your health. So diving into that, getting gutsy. Your other hormones and what you need to work on in order to get your thyroid balanced. And then again, I'll explain my top 3 advanced tests that I feel like are essential for every person to do. And then what supplements you should be taking to support your thyroid, detox, and adrenals. So the cost of 4 visits with me alone would be over $1,000. You will get in this course me once a week for 4 weeks to go over your questions, provide you with support. Plus you'll have lifetime access to the program, the diet plans, and the workbook. And generally I have people go through this, I suggest taking 8 weeks. But I feel like with my support that we can get through this in 4 weeks, and we'll do this all for the cost of about $197. So today's bonus is just for hanging out with me for the past hour. I will email you the 9 signs of that your skin is warning you about a thyroid problem and the top 5 blood tests for high performers. The Thyroid Jumpstart group program will be set to start June 7th at noon, and we'll run it for 4 weeks with weekly lunch hour meetings. And all of this is if you sign up by Sunday, June 5th, and then we can take advantage of this time together to fast track your thyroid. Okay. And if there's anybody that has questions, please feel free to throw some in the chat. Okay, so the cart for the program will be open as of today and will be closing on Sunday. So if you or somebody you know you think would benefit from this course, make sure to take action quickly, and then we can get started right away. All right, well, if there's no questions, I'm gonna end this talk. But I will be emailing this out to you as a replay, and I will also include the bonuses for you. Okay. Last chance for questions. Well, thank you all for joining me. It's been a pleasure, and we will see you all soon. Okay, take care.